Good morning. Welcome to the 28th Annual Eggs and Issues from the Spencer Chamber of Commerce. I'm Sharifa Jones, Executive Director of the Spencer Chamber, and I will be your moderator this morning. I'd like to thank Spencer Municipal Utilities for live streaming and taping to replay later, Mediacom, who is recording for later broadcasting, Spencer Radio Group for airing live on 102.5 and KICD 1240 AM, Spencer Signal for covering the session via Facebook Live, and the Spencer Daily Reporter. We will start today by having our guest legislators give a brief opening statement. Then I will open the floor to those who are in attendance this morning to ask questions. And finally, we'll address any questions that have been submitted to the Chamber by area citizens. Please remember, the goal of this forum is to try and cover as many topics as possible in the time allowed. All questions will be shared with the legislators so they may follow up with those who have asked the questions. Also, please remember, questions will be kept to 2 minutes from those who are asking them. And I may need to keep our legislators on a time limit too. Next, I'd like to thank our legislators who represent this region for giving of their time in this informational forum. Let's start with our opening statements. Senator Whiting, if you would like to go ahead and take a few moments and share with us some insights.
And the reason that she said we might need to keep us on track, because I went off for about 7 minutes on the big tech bill last week. I'll spend about 15 seconds on it here. We passed the bill out of the Iowa Senate. It's a great bill. I'm glad we did it, and I'm really honored I had a chance to vote for that bill. And what essentially it says is if big tech platforms want to censor this free speech of Iowans, they lose their cushy tax breaks. That's it. So don't censor Iowans, and you get to keep all the great tax breaks that you're already getting. We also worked on a bill in the Senate on removing the triggers on the income tax reforms that were done a couple years ago, as well as getting rid of the death tax. That passed unanimously. And it's my understanding that we're going to try to tackle some property tax issues soon, as well as we've discussed at length in these forums for probably all the years I've been in the Senate. The way that we do mental health funding in the state of Iowa via largely on property tax is different than the way a lot of states do it. So we've been trying to find ways to maybe adjust that and find a sustainable source of funding going forward. We're going to try to take a stab at that in the Iowa Senate. And then it's my understanding the House passed a couple really great Second Amendment bills that we've worked through the committee process and that I've been supportive of in the Judiciary Committee. And I'm hopeful that those will come to the floor very soon, possibly as soon as Monday, and I look forward to supporting those. So, and as always, look forward to the great questions that we get today.
Great. Thank you, Senator Whiting. We're going to go ahead and go to Representative Jones, who is joining us via Zoom.
Well, hi, everybody, and thank you for accommodating me. I am very, very, very pregnant and just trying to limit my bubble a little bit here. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to attend via Zoom here. So things to the Capitol are getting a little quieter. Gone are the days where the House will be passing 30 bills in one day. Things are really shifting off of the calendar, and we're tossing all that stuff over to the Senate. Now, the Senate obviously is going to toss some stuff back to us, but I think things are going to start slowing down here after the last funnel week on March 5th. We're just trying to catch up from COVID. A lot of bills that were needed to get done but weren't priorities did not get done last year, and so we're kind of cleaning up some bills from that. Still addressing some unresolved issues that, again, were absolutely vital that needed to be passed last year, and then just some cleanup bills too. So, we had a lot of bills that were just kind of pushed through, bipartisan, just needed to get done and need to get over to the Senate. So now it's their turn to take up some of those bills and they'll toss them over to us. But I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of a slowdown at the Capitol. This week we spent about 2 days on tort reform and 1 day on gun bills, and so that was kind of the big topics of the week. We're taking some bigger, more controversial topics on and taking them off the calendar. So looking ahead, we had the revenue estimating conference met yesterday. Things look okay, but we have to be very cautious as we continue on the budgeting process. And now is really the time in the legislative session where we start to turn our attention to budgeting. So the budget does look okay, which is great. We're getting fantastic reviews around the nation about how prepared we were as Iowans for the budget and for COVID as much as we could be. But that said, we have to be very careful. And you'll probably hear a lot about injections of federal funds coming in through the state. That's very tricky, very dangerous money because that's one-time money. So while it may sound great, hey, you're getting this huge pot of money, why don't you start this new program? Why don't you pay for some salaries? Why don't you do that? While they may be worthwhile efforts, we've got to be very careful because that money's not coming in next year. So we've got to be very, very careful about how that money is handled. Plus, there's going to be a lot of federal restrictions on that. So I know Ohio has already filed a lawsuit against the federal government contesting whether or not they can use that money for tax reform. Which would be a really interesting concept here, but we kind of got to see how that all plays out. So still a lot of questions up in the air, but still a lot of issues to tackle, but things are certainly going to be slowing down here in the coming weeks. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Megan. Representative Wills.
Thank you. It's great to see people here in the audience today. So thank you for being here. Whoever's online, thank you for being there, listening to us today and sending your questions to us. Really appreciate the forum as far as being able to hear what your thoughts are, what you want and what you believe. So that's kind of the goal of this meeting. So I don't want to take a lot of time with opening comments because I want to hear what you have to say. But I do want to have a few things to say about especially what's been happening in Des Moines. Representative Jones kind of touched on a little bit about what I was going to say. So I'm going to try to skip over some of the things. But last week, the state of Iowa was named the #1 state in the nation for opportunity. And I think that that's partially due to the legislature, both the House and the Senate, and the governor working together and developing a room for growth for our state, room for people to be able to develop opportunities and businesses. And so I think that also it has a lot to do with how we've been budgeting, how we've been planning for just such emergency has happened over the last year because we've been very conservative in our budgeting methods. So because of that, the state of Iowa is the #1 state in the nation for opportunity. If you've got kids that have moved away from the state of Iowa, let them know. We've got 3.1% unemployment. We've got jobs. Get them back here because this state is about ready to explode in growth. But we need people to do that. And so let's get people home. Let's get people back to the state and working and developing our state and growing our state because I think we're poised right on the edge to do that. Representative Jones is exactly right. The last 2 weeks before this week, I think we did somewhere close to 100 bills over the course of those 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks. And probably we had over those 100 bills that we sent over to the Senate, we probably had about 2,000 some odd votes for those bills. And because there are some amendments and stuff like that, and probably about 100 no votes. So very bipartisan bunch of bills. This week, the House tackled 6 bills. We spent about as much time on those 6 bills as we did those 100 bills. And it was very partisan. So we dealt with issues such as freedom of speech. We dealt with requirements in conjunction with talking about diversity and how that possibly can be taught. And sometimes we're actually teaching one viewpoint versus multiple viewpoints. And so the bill actually says you have to teach multiple viewpoints. You can't just teach one viewpoint that's maybe skewed or slanted towards maybe not even the truth. We also went in and did a couple gun rights bills, and I'm very proud of those because we passed and sent over to the Senate. I predict they'll sign both of these bills, but firearm manufacturers freedom from being sued. So if I take a gun and go shoot somebody, and that somebody can now sue the firearms manufacturers. Well, that's crazy. We don't sue car manufacturers if I run somebody over in the middle of the street. That's the person who's driving the car's fault. It's the same concept, but it's happening across the nation where we're having, it's not happening in Iowa yet, but this is a preventative measure where we're going to say, hey, you can't sue the firearms manufacturer because of some irresponsible or frivolous thing that somebody else did. That's that person's responsibility. That's that person's duty to be responsible for. We also passed a bill that the big part of it, the thing that was most controversial was constitutional carry. I don't like to call it constitutional carry because there's nothing in the Constitution about it, but I like to call it the freedom to carry. The freedom, basically, you don't have to go to the government and seek permission, a permission slip to carry a firearm. And so we passed those and sent them on to the Senate. And I predict they'll probably stand fairly well over in the Senate and go to the governor fairly soon. Representative Jones also touched on the COVID money, the COVID relief money that was passed, $2 trillion. I can't even imagine, I can't believe $2 trillion, 9% of which goes to COVID relief. So I don't know how we can call it a COVID relief bill. I'm so frustrated with this, but we're going to get it. It's coming to the state of Iowa. It's coming to Illinois, New York, and California. I was asked last weekend, can't we just turn that money down? And I said, well, we sure can, but guess what? It doesn't go back to the federal government. It goes to California, New York, and Illinois. And so what should we do? And they absolutely said we should keep that money, and we should make sure that that money is not being spent improperly. We should be responsible and conservative with that money. The problem with that is we've been looking at tax cuts. We've been looking at different things to invigorate our economy even more and to protect you, the taxpayers, because taxes are taxpayer money. They're not government money, and that's kind of a major distinction between the two parties right now. The other party thinks that taxes are the government's money. Well, it's not. It's your money that's being used by the government, and we've got to make that distinction. But with the COVID money, if we accept that money, which we will get about $1.53 billion, the state of Iowa, local governments, the city of Spencer, like the city of Spencer, will get $1.3 billion. So that's $2.7 billion that our state of Iowa is going to get. Well, our state budget is almost $8 billion. So that's a lot of money. And where are we going to spend that? Well, I think we can spend it on some very good things, but we've got to be very reasonable and measured in our approach. But with that, we can't do tax cuts either directly or indirectly, is what the bill says. Well, I don't believe it's constitutional, and I'm 100% in agreement with Ohio and believe that the state of Iowa should join the lawsuit against the federal government and trying to dictate what the 10th Amendment says is our right. It's the state's right to control whether we tax or we cut taxes, and the federal government can't step in and dictate to us those kind of things. And so I'm very, very passionate about this $2 trillion that the federal government spent. That is just craziness, and 9% of which is COVID relief. Well, they can't call it a COVID relief bill. Thank you. I'm sorry, I probably took too much time and a little bit passionate on that.
You're fine. Thank you. Okay, with that, we will go ahead and get into questions. And as a reminder, please keep questions to 2.5 minutes. The first question comes from Mike Hoyk. And Mike, I would invite you to come up to the podium. Mike has a question related to Medicaid payment rate.
Morning. I was at the last Eggs and Issues, if you may recall, to ask about our daughters in a facility in Storm Lake, special needs. Since then, just kind of coincidence, we got a letter from the CEO of Hope Haven, kind of just stating the same situation that you kind of explained to me last time with the Medicaid funding. Just one facility said right now they're sitting at 10% open positions. They've got 72 full-time positions open right now with 800 employees statewide. So I just wanted to kind of bring that to note. And we go get our daughter every weekend, and we walked in there last weekend. Grapetree now has their own desk in the office with a calendar. And every time a Grapetree staffing comes in to sub, they sign in. Every day on that calendar was full with at least 2 names. I mean, they're using the temp service 7 days a week down there. And it's the people that they do have they're overworked. They're working double shifts. They're filling in. Things are slipping through the fingers. stuff's starting to happen. We're getting calls from school. Our daughter is showing up with their mouth full of medicine. She doesn't get it all. It's a revolving door of the inconsistency. It's not their issue. It's just, different face every day. These kids don't have any consistency in their schedule. And the staff's that's there struggling. They're doing the best they can. But if you're using a staffing service 7 days a week with more than one person, in my opinion, down there, you're in trouble because they don't have that many employees at that facility. So I just wanted to bring that to you. And I know, Mr. Whiting mentioned the big tax breaks that all these tech companies are getting. A lot of that money's going out of state. How about we cut some of that and, take care of the people in the state? Why do we have to butter all their bread? These people, these kids, these adults, their positions are no fault of their own. They didn't do anything to, be in this position. And it's, we did not put our daughter there by choice. You talk about a hard decision, drop your child off that has seizures every day, that can't verbally communicate, and leave them with the stranger and then walk away. Try that. It's not by choice. But I would, I'd hope that somehow, we could find some money in the budget somewhere. I know everybody it's a big pie. Everybody wants a chunk, but how about, these people don't have a voice, a lot of them, and they're not the majority, they're the minority. So, I'd hope you guys would just kind of think about it and see if you can't, according to this gentleman, that's how the only way that they can really subsidize increase their pay is through their Medicaid reimbursements, because pretty much all of their clients are on Medicaid. So, I did some checking down in Storm Lake, and just out of curiosity on my own. And yeah, those people are near or at the bottom of the pay scale in Storm Lake for what they're doing.
Thank you for your question. Very important topic. Representative Wills, if you would like to go ahead and address that.
So as far as Medicaid reimbursement rates, part of that is set by the federal government. I'm not sure exactly how the formula works. That's kind of outside of my wheelhouse. Maybe Representative Jones or Senator Whiting have a better idea. I don't sit on the Human Resources Committee, and so I don't know the details of how that's all done. I know that it's done, and that's probably the extent of my knowledge. I guess, you partially mentioned about the tax credits or tax cuts to corporations. That's 100% why I'd like to see us reduce taxes. That's 100% why I'd like to make our state more competitive. Instead of giving out tax breaks to corporations, I'd like to see us do it up front and just say, hey, because right now our 12% corporate tax rate is the highest in the country, or one of the highest in the country. I'd like to see our corporate tax rate go down to half that or even more, so that basically we don't have to give tax credits to corporations. I think, and I'm going off my memory, and so that's probably a dangerous thing, but I think that corporate taxes bring in about $200 million a year, which is small potatoes in our state compared to all of the other revenue. So it really doesn't bring in much, but we pay out way more than that in tax credits, or we basically don't bring in taxes because of tax credits that are more than that. I just like to get rid of tax credits. It's a controversial issue anyway, but yet we seem to do them all the time, and we do more of them all the time. Just like to get rid of them and level off our taxes so that it's more attractive to come here. To your point, as far as our nursing homes and our care facilities, they're going to have to follow the money, so to speak, as far as how much money are they being reimbursed versus how much they can pay out to employees. I just left a Casey's just a few minutes ago on the way here, and they're advertising $13 an hour for a clerk and that sort of thing at the Casey's. I don't know how much they pay at the nursing home, but I bet it's not much more than that. And so, yes, absolutely, we need to look at increasing the pay to our nursing homes and to our care facilities, because they're much, in my opinion, that Casey's job is a beginning job, a minimum wage job, and yet they're paying $13 an hour. Our care facilities, they take care of people. They take care of people's lives are in balance at the care facilities. I just don't know how that works, because if you look at our system, a very small, even a 1% increase to Medicaid we're talking millions and millions of dollars. So I don't know how that works in balance to the grand scheme of things. And again, so I'm kind of like probably the worst one to be the first one to go on this question, because I just don't know a lot about how that works. But I've made a good attempt at it, not a great attempt, but the best I could. So thank you.
Thank you. Senator Whiting, if you want to go ahead and give us your thoughts.
Sure. And thanks again, Mike, for your question and your advocacy. So I've actually gotten a lot of emails about this, probably in about the last week and a half. And I actually have a pretty good relationship with the CEO there, some of the staff there that I've worked with in the community, and without going into a lot of detail, quite a few of the residents actually. And that's a neat relationship we've been able to form there. Yeah. So if I'm remembering correctly, the formula that Representative Wills was talking about is called FMAP. And I don't know a whole lot about it. There's school funding is probably about the most complicated thing I've ever heard of. FMAP is really close right there. But within all of that, I think one of the things that we do need to look at, and it's what I referenced last time, is we do need to look at what the state's role is in the reimbursement rates, because as I've heard that the big reason that you have, a lot of temporary staff and a lot of openings probably has to go to the pay, and you get a significantly different pool of applicants at $10 versus $12 versus $14, $16, and $18 an hour for these jobs. And I've heard that from folks in the direct care business. And so if there's anything that we can do to leverage additional federal money, FMAP money coming in, and or look at how the state can do that, I think it's something that we should consider. We spend a lot of money on a lot of things. We've had rules come through the Administrative Rules Committee where people are going to increase their printing costs by $50,000 or $100,000. We can save $50,000, $100,000 in printing costs and transfer that money into direct care, because these are certainly among the most vulnerable folks in our population and need the most loving care. And I referenced it last time. My grandma, my sister-in-law, my aunt, people who have that heart and passion to serve and love on folks. Those are absolutely the kind of folks that we want in these jobs. And so if it's a matter of if it's a financial matter that someone says I can make more money, we do pick on the gas stations a lot, but they're the ones that are paying fairly decent money right now, double minimum wage. However we can work as a state to increase those reimbursement rates. And I've talked to my colleagues actually this week about it, looking at ways that we can consider increasing the reimbursement rates. And then also something I get a lot of email about is telehealth, mental health parity, those kinds of payments. So a lot of things to look at, very complicated. This is what this period of the session gets into as we transition over to the budget. So I hope it's something that will be very much a part of the conversation this year.
Great. Thank you, Senator. Representative Jones, if you would like to weigh in on this topic.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. And it looks like there's some comments online that some folks are having a hard time hearing some of us. So if you guys maybe want to get a little closer to the mic, and then I'll try to do that myself here too. I'm trying to follow those comments as much as I can, but Mike, I appreciate the question. And I think you're right. We really do need to take a good hard look at Medicaid reimbursement. And Zach brought up a really timely topic, and that's the FMAP. And so what the FMAP does is it basically judges our federal Medicaid reimbursement rate based on how well our state is doing. And so the better you do, the less federal money you get. So it's kind of like a punishment for the winners, right? And so because Iowa is doing so well, it's going to mean that Iowa is going to get less FMAP money. So that really puts us into a sticky situation when we're talking about Medicaid funding, because we really need to draw down some more federal funds. But at the same time, they're kind of dinging us because we're doing so well, right? So that's going to be one of our problems that we're facing in this upcoming legislative session. And while our state is doing really well, and we've got a little bit of a cushion in an ending balance, and then we've got this federal money coming in. Again, that money is very, very tricky because that money should not be used on salaries. Because that money's not going to be there next year. And so what happens if we would have a huge cash injection this year for salaries of these direct care workers? The problem would be next year, how do we pay for it? Because that money's not there, right? So it's very tricky situation on how to handle the financing of that, right? The other problem is, I know there's been some discussion about tax credits, and the way tax credits work is that we never have that money in our pocket, right? Like we never have that in the state coffers. Those are incentives to get businesses here, to get businesses off the ground, to entice them to come to our state, to expand their workforce, to put their kids in our schools, to get their spouses here, to have them buy a home here, to have them spend their money here, to buy their groceries here. And hopefully then their return on investment will be greater than the tax credits that they doled out. But we've never seen that money. We've never realized that credit in our state's coffers. And so that also gets very tricky when people say, well, just stop giving tax credits. And while that may seem like an easy answer, it's not going to give us a pot of gold to then pour towards a more worthy service, right? So there's a lot of moving parts here and a lot of things that we need to be very careful about, because we don't want to have a one-time cash injection to these folks and then not be able to pay for it next year. So there's a lot happening, but I really hope that we're able to do that this year. As I said before, we're just kind of starting to dig into the budget issues this session. We just got the revenue estimating conference estimates yesterday. And so now's the time of year where we start to ramp up on those budgets. And I've gotten a lot of emails on this issue, and I really hope that we're able to bump up that number so we can bring home, provide a little bit more money for those providers who are really providing a service that not everybody can do. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Jones. Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to our next question and topic. Julie Zeg has a question in regards to gun permits.
Thank you. I'm so pleased that Mr. Wills is here today because I have questions, and I think he'll probably be very well informed and can help me with that. First, I'm starting with a rhetorical question that I don't expect an answer to. When I came today, I had to put down my name, I had to put down where I'm from. There's a time limit on how long I can talk, and yet I don't feel like my First Amendment rights are being violated. I guess that wasn't a question after all. My question on gun permits is, please explain to me how having to have a permit is a violation of the Second Amendment. I also want to thank you for not calling this constitutional carry. I like the way you referenced that. I have particular questions that I'm not sure I understand enough that I hope you can help me with. With the new legislation, yes or no, would you need a permit to purchase a gun? Yes or no, would I need a permit to carry a gun? Yes or no, would I need a permit to carry a concealed weapon? Currently, my husband hunts, so I know this. He can't load his guns at home, put them in the truck, take them out to the field and go hunting. He can't transport a loaded weapon. At least that's my understanding. That's what he tells me. So yes or no, can you transport loaded weapons under the new proposed legislation? And following up on that, have there been cases in other states or in Iowa where permits have been called into question, their constitutionality? If you're saying it violates the Second Amendment right, I'm wondering what the courts have said about that in the past. Okay, hope that made that clear. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Representative Jones, if you would like to weigh in on that first.
Yeah, I apologize. I was not typing fast enough to keep up with all of those questions, but in general, I can answer a few questions regarding the gun legislation from this last week that the House sent over to the Senate. So basically what we're moving towards is permitless carry. And so basically Iowans will have the option of obtaining a permit if they want to carry a weapon. And so the reason, and that sounds kind of silly, like, well, why would I get a permit if I don't want one? Why would we have that option? And that's because basically so that you will be able, if you have a permit, that'll last for 5 years, and then you'll be able to get a gun without having to go through the background check process again. And then also there's some reciprocity concerns with other states. John Wills is a lot more fluent on these issues than I am, so I will toss it over to him. But I hope we can get all those questions answered, and I apologize, I was not typing them out as fast as I was hearing them. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Representative Jones. And you are up next, Representative Wills.
All right, hopefully everybody can hear me just a little bit better. We've turned our volume up and moved our speakers closer, so hopefully we don't have a problem with that. And I was writing as fast as I could, so hopefully I got all the questions. If not, I'll ask for a follow-up after the meeting or whatever, but I'll try to do the best I can, and then Senator Whiting can kind of tell us what the Senate's working on. I think it's probably the same bill or very similar. They just aren't as fast on this particular issue as what we were. But as far as purchasing, yes, if you do not have a concealed carry permit or a permit to buy with this bill, you can buy a gun. However, you must go through a background check, which is not, that's basically different. In the past, if you didn't have a permit to buy or a concealed carry permit, you had to have a background check. Now you will have a background check. So we believe that this will increase the background checks in the state of Iowa vastly. We'll have a way more background checks, which is what people have been asking for. And so we're very happy to be able to help people have freedom to carry, but at the same time, do something that people are asking for, is provide for more background checks and provide for more ability for us to make sure that people who are buying guns, weapons, should be buying those guns and weapons. Can you carry if you do not have a permit to carry with this bill? The answer is yes. If you're currently allowed to carry with a concealed carry permit, you would be allowed to carry without a permit. If you're barred from carrying a gun, you would not be allowed to carry a gun. So it changes nothing as far as who can carry or who cannot carry. All it does is say, if you're already legal to carry a gun, you just don't need a permit. And so the basis is not so much is it constitutional to have a permit to carry, as is it something that we should require lawfully abiding citizens to do, to get a permission slip to carry something that they're already legally allowed to do. So I would kind of liken it to a hall pass at school. If you're walking down that hall during a break and you're doing stuff the right way, you don't need a hall pass. But if you're leaving your class in the middle of a class, you need a hall pass, because that's not something that you're allowed to do. Well, the same thing goes with a permit to carry that you need to have. If you're legally able to carry now with a permit, then you would be legally able to carry without a permit. Transportation, I'm not sure exactly about that question, because if your husband was going to go hunting, in the course of that hunting, he could carry a long gun, as long as it was in a case and unloaded, he could carry that gun right now. Question about whether you could carry a gun loaded if you had a permit to carry, that's something, that's safety would look at that and kind of dictate that, I believe. But yes, you can transport now a gun to go hunting. Now, if you're talking about a pistol or handgun, really the only aspect that I could see is going hunting, maybe during the deer season with a handgun that's allowed for deer hunting, or during trapping season, and you'd still be allowed to carry a gun for those right now for those activities. And so it doesn't really change anything in regards to that. Other states, other cases where this is happening right now, I believe 23 states have started, are in the process, or have moved to a permitless carry. It's a trend nationwide of folks saying, listen, if you're legal and lawful, why do you need to have a permission slip to carry something that you're already legal and lawful to do? And so that's the basis for it. Here's the deal. I'm going to still have a permit to carry. I'm still going to pay every 5 years for my permission slip to carry a gun for two reasons. Number one, that allows me to purchase a gun without having a background check. Not that I care about the background check, it's just faster. So I don't want to sit in a gun store for an hour or 2 hours while my background check's being done. Oftentimes it's less than that, sometimes it's more than that, but I just don't want to go through that hassle. If I want to buy a gun, I want to buy a gun. But the second thing, and I think this is the most important part, if I don't have that permit to carry, then I don't have reciprocity with other states. And so I can't carry a gun into another state. That we have, I think 30 some states have reciprocity with the state of Iowa. And so I want to be able to carry my gun into Nebraska or Illinois. We can't go into Illinois no matter what, but Missouri or whatever state I want to go to, I want to be able to have that reciprocity. I want to have that ability to do that. If I don't have a permit to carry, then I can't do that legally. And so that's kind of where I'm at. That's kind of the gist of it. Did I miss anything? Did I cover all of the questions? Perfect. Thank you. So I'd be happy to talk about it again after the meeting, but that's kind of my response. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Wills. And Senator Whiting.
Thank you. Yeah, I think probably we got the thumbs up that John answered a lot of the questions, which is good. So I would just say, generally a couple things is, I prefer the term permitless carry. The term constitutional carry is used by one organization in the state of Iowa to raise a lot of money. And so for that very reason, I kind of don't like that word, don't like that phrase. But I know that the people that email me in support of constitutional carry are good people nonetheless. So I prefer permitless carry. I agree with the option that it being optional, not a requirement. The way that I look at it is the right to keep and bear arms that's the issue that we're discussing. It's an enumerated right in the Constitution. So why do we need a permission slip to do it? I've used, as I've communicated with other people, other examples, you say, well, we need a driver's license to drive or a passport to travel. Those may be found in the shadows and the penumbras of the 14th Amendment, but they're not enumerated rights. And so the government, I think, has a rational basis in putting some parameters around there. And then, just the one distinction, you had said you had a question at the beginning, and I thought it was a good point. I view this as a private event hosted by a private organization, even though we're in a building. So how they manage it and have people come in, I think is perfectly acceptable. This is I'm just going to cover up my info on here, but this is my permit to carry, and I will plan to go into my sheriff's office and get it from my good friend Sheriff Balloon, who taught me DARE when I was in 6th grade every few years, and carry it with me. And then I guess the other thing, the two other points. I don't read it as applying to long guns either. So probably the rules are still the same there. I think John answered the question so well. I'll go with that. And if we have any other questions, feel free to circle back with us afterwards. That would be great. Great.
And Representative Wills actually would like to have a couple more minutes on this topic.
Not a couple more minutes, just 2 more points. So I just wanted to make sure when we were in debate on Wednesday night, almost to Thursday morning, I think we finished at 11:30. 2 points were really kind of thrown at us, and the bill were supposedly problems with it, background checks. And I absolutely do believe that this bill, this method that we've approached will increase the number of background checks. I think I mentioned that, but I want to just reinforce that I believe. So let's just say I don't have a permit to carry, and I say, hey, you know what? I want to go buy a gun. Well, I go to the gun store. I have to have a background check, and so that's the one point. The second point was, they say that in a private sale, that we're going to get rid of background checks with private sales. And so, Representative Whiting, would you just play along with me here a second? We didn't talk about this before, but so if you want to buy a gun from me, yeah, so we're like buddies. We know each other. We spend every other week together, and we know pretty good details about one another. Should I sell a gun to you?
If you want to.
If I want to, I could, and I could do that without a background check. And knowing Senator Whiting the way I do, I probably would sell a gun to Senator Whiting. Now, Senator Whiting, if I don't know you hardly at all, but I know your name, I know your wife's name, and you know, we're on first name basis. Should I sell a gun to you with this bill?
May not be as advisable.
That's a perfect example because the bill specifically says if you know intimate details, or you should know intimate details that that person shouldn't have a gun, you should not sell a gun to that person. And here's why. Because we have raised the penalties for me selling a gun to somebody that is not allowed to have a gun. So right now it's a misdemeanor. We've raised it to a felon. So I would sell, and I may not even know that he is not permitted to have a gun, but if I sell a gun to Senator Whiting and he is not allowed to have a gun, I've just put myself into jeopardy of losing my gun rights forever because I'm a felon. I would be a felon at that point. And so I believe that even in private sales, we will increase the number of background checks because in that situation, I'm probably going to say, you know, Senator Whiting, I know that you like this gun, but let's just go to the FFL gun dealer down the street and let's consign it, because I don't want to jeopardize my gun rights. And so this bill definitely will add more background checks, especially in private sales. And that was the argument that, well, we're not going to have background checks because of these private sales. Well, we've fixed that. I think it was a loophole where I would get off almost scot-free if I sold a gun to somebody that I didn't know if they're a felon or not, or I didn't know if they had mental problems or not, but I still sold it to them. Well, now we've said, you will know. And if you don't know, you better watch out because you're going to be in trouble. The second thing that was really hammered home to us, the Democrats really said and stated that we're allowing the carry of guns on school buses. Well, absolutely, we're not. That's already law. In law right now says that school buses can have guns transported. They have to be unloaded, and the school has to give permission for that. I think this is a very important distinction, but we had to move from the current code section, we had to move that language from the current code section into this new code section so that it was consistent. So it's already state law that you have to have permission, but you can carry guns on a school bus. Why would we have that? We have scholastic shooting in the state of Iowa, and this is schools that are doing this. And so those kids get on a school bus with their guns, and so that's the reason that portion of the law is there. But the Democrats on Wednesday night were really hitting us hard saying, did you know this bill will allow the carry of guns on school buses? Well, it always was there. And so we got to definitely make sure that we have that distinction and understand why that portion of the law is there, is to allow for interscholastic activities. Thank you for that extra time. I'm sorry.
Absolutely, that's fine. And thank you for the great question.
And Sharifa, can I just add 15 seconds of things? Two things. One, out of the corner of my eye, I could see the camera panning out. And so that was making me really nervous. I knew I was going to have to, I was on the spot there. But second, I want to give a shout out to my speech teacher, Ed Purdy, in high school, because I was a fantastic improv guy. So we didn't plan that. And thanks to Ed Purdy, I was prepared to answer Senator Will's improvised questions. So thanks, Ed.
Great, thank you. Mike Maurer has a question regarding mental health and the use of property taxes. So Mike, if you'd like to come up.
I was just wondering how we're doing on removing the funding of mental health from property taxes and putting it onto just regular taxes. Some counties have greater needs than others, and I think it would be better if they could have, more fairness in how those taxes are distributed instead of that being a burden of property owners alone.
Great, thank you. Senator Whiting, if you want to take the question.
There is a bill that has either been introduced or will be introduced very soon in the Iowa Senate. We talked about it last week on that very issue, and we're looking to tackle it as I said, kind of at the opening, we're one of a few states that does it this way. And so we are going to try to find a way to remove that off of the backs of the property taxpayers and shift more of that burden over to the state. So tune in.
Thank you. And Representative Jones.
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is a really great question, and one that we have been talking about for years now. We really had a lot of steam behind this issue until COVID hit, and then it kind of fizzled and faded. And I apologize if you can hear thundering above me. There's not a storm. It is my son's bedroom right above me, and he is apparently jumping right now. So I apologize for the extra sound, but this is really an issue that we need to really start taking a greater in-depth policy look at. And I appreciate Governor Reynolds putting out a platform for that to happen in her Condition of the State address last January. We are about one of 4 states, I think, left that pay for mental health services with property taxes. And it's just not a good connection. Like what is the connection between mental health and owning property? It doesn't make sense. It would be better suited for mental health services to be paid with sales tax dollars, because then it kind of bumps up a little bit and bumps down according to the amount of people that you have. And there's just a lot more of a economic connection there. Plus, it gives everybody some skin in the game, right? If you don't own property tax, or if you don't own property right now, you're not helping to pay for mental health services. And this is an issue that we should all be bearing the burden of. We can all do better when it comes to mental health services. And certainly that is something that we can all be contributing to. So I agree. We need to be tackling this issue. It's great to hear that there's a bill floating in the Senate. I think probably what some of the holdup is right now is that we don't know what the federal government is doing. We don't know what money they're sending us, and we don't know what that money can be used for. I could see very well that a lot of it very well could be likely that some of that money will be allocated by the federal government specifically to health and human services issues, mental health services in particular, because that is a COVID, an issue that we have seen increase and ramp up through COVID. So I think we're going to have to wait and see when it comes to tax reform, what happens from the federal government and what we can do on the state level for tax reform with that money. So it might be a little bit more of a wait to figure out what we can do, but certainly that is an issue we need to tackle.
Great. Thank you, Representative Jones. And Representative Wills.
Mike, I think that you're speaking our language here because we're all in agreement. Last year, the governor had a bold plan on property tax relief, which involved her Invest in Iowa plan. And so that was, I think, a bold plan. I really liked it. She put it on hold this year in favor of next year. So I don't know if we're looking at several different plans or not. In the House, we've looked at maybe not doing it in Invest Iowa, but just doing it as a separate bill. I think maybe the Senate's version is probably close to what we were looking at. So we may just wait to see what their bill does and says. But we absolutely believe that property taxes should come off of the mental health levy. But here's the issue. I talked about it in my opening remarks. The federal government, I believe unconstitutionally, is directing that governments who accept COVID relief money cannot indirectly or directly lower taxes. And so if we were to take on mental health as a state funded program, which I believe it should be, at least mostly, then local governments, if they accept COVID relief money, which 9% is going to relief, if they accept that money, they would not be able to lower their property taxes. According to right now what the law says, I believe that we should challenge this in court, and but until we get that challenge, that's the law of the land. And so I think that you could right now very easily see us lowering or taking the property tax portion of the mental health levy. The local governments not allowed to lower taxes and then get comfortable with that money and then never lower taxes. And I think that's a challenge that I don't want to try to face, because I think there's many county governments in our state that would say, oh, we got a lot of extra money and we don't have to lower taxes, and it becomes now part of their budget and never goes to the relief that we want people to see. And so I think we really need to keep that in the back of our mind. And it goes to the COVID relief money as well. I believe a lot of, even the first round of COVID relief, I've heard of schools hiring employees. Well, the second round of COVID relief has to be spent by 2024. I've heard of people, local governments, saying, well, we need to hire more employees with this money. Well, here's the problem with that. It's gone in 2024. And then where are you going to get the money to hire, continue hiring that employee? And so I'm really worried that we need to make sure that this money is spent on one-time issues. And so we in the House have been looking at this $1.53 billion that we're going to get, and where can we spend this money that will impact our state for generations. Well, one of the things that I personally feel, broadband, the governor has a very, very bold plan to spend $450 million over the next 3 years on broadband. And that would make us the #1 state in the nation if that build out happened in broadband and access to broadband and speed of access to broadband. Well, I believe that's a one-time expense that will benefit our state for generations upon generations. So I believe that's a legitimate expense. Hiring an employee is an ongoing expense, and I don't believe that's a proper use of this COVID money. And I think we're going to get people, we're going to get county governments, local governments, city governments, schools, possibly even our state in trouble if we handle this COVID money without looking at it in that way. And so I know that's not part of your question, but it does bear on the property tax question itself, because I believe that until we get this fixed and figured out in court, I don't know if we can do tax cuts, even at a local level, because of what it could put us into a jeopardy for.
Great. Thank you for your response. The next question comes from Leo Steffes, and his question is relating to ethanol. And I'll just remind you to try and speak into the microphone as best as possible, since we know it's perfect.
Excuse me. I'll have to do this because I was calling their attention. Half the people, I can't hear what you're saying. I have hearing aids, but if you don't speak in the speaker, other people can't hear. So I'll encourage anybody else to use a speaker. First off, I'd like to say I want to thank you guys. I see the governor signed the bill for the 14-year-old kids to be on the farm, to drive between farms and stuff. Those of you in the city don't realize that, but it's making legal what was happening quite a bit anyhow. So it's a good thing. My question is, another one is on ethanol. I'd like to know the status of the mandatory bill. Iowa's the largest ethanol producer in the nation, and it's a vital part of it, and it helps the farmers. Our corn prices wouldn't be what they are if it wasn't for that. And yet we, the state, don't have a mandatory ethanol, in which we're encouraging that you mandate it. Minnesota is very small in the ethanol production, yet they've mandated it, and it's working fine. So any comments, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your question. Representative Wills, if you'd like to take that first.
Yeah, I actually am a huge fan of ethanol. I think that it's a perfect renewable fuel. And I think we need to support ethanol in the state of Iowa. We need to continue to promote it and make sure that it has a growing, is on the upward swing as far as the ability to grow. I personally had a bill this year that kind of did every bill that we do has unintended consequences, and some have intended consequences, but my bill had some intended consequences and unintended. Intended, I wanted to promote ethanol by just simply getting the conversation started about having flex fuel vehicles. Well, so I just said all vehicles sold in Iowa must be flex fuel vehicles by 2035, because that's a date that I heard California is making all cars be sold be electric vehicles. Well, the unintended consequence that my bill did was say that you can't sell any electric cars in the state of Iowa by 2035. I didn't care about that. I didn't want it, but the Sierra Club sure did, and they picked up on it and said, I want to ban all electric cars in the state of Iowa by 2035. I didn't. It was just an unintended consequence. I don't care what people drive, to be honest, but I want to promote ethanol in the state of Iowa, and I want to make sure that ethanol is promoted across the nation. So that was kind of a beginning stage of the governor's bill. The governor's bill has some issues, has some problems, and I think we're working those out. And I think right now that's in Ways and Means, so it's able to survive this full year and possibly even the next year if we need to. I don't think we will. I think we'll be able to get this thing done and wrapped up, because I think from what I'm hearing, it's pretty close to being a live round as far as something that we can all vote on and move forward with. But the governor's bill, just for people that don't know, it requires gas stations to have only one pump that sells unethanoled gas, and all the other pumps in that gas station has to have ethanol. And so there's a lot of question. That's expensive for gas stations. So a lot of question about how are we going to do this mandate and make gas stations be required to sell ethanol. So I think we're working those out so that the mandate doesn't hurt gas stations nearly as well, especially our mom and pop gas stations, the small business gas stations. I'm not so worried about like the Casey's or Come and Go's, because they can handle it. I'm more concerned about the small independent gas stations, the small folks that are out there trying to make a living and barely scraping by on their gas station. And so that's kind of where we're at in the House. I don't know where it is in the Senate, but I think we're really getting close to having a good bill that we can pass in the House and move forward with the Senate, unless they've already got something. And I think we're very unified on the House and the Senate, and I think probably the bill managers are working together, but I'm not 100% sure on that. I'm not on the Ways and Means Committee, and so I don't know for sure if that's the case, but I think that's what's going on.
Great, thank you. And Senator Whiting.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I would echo that by saying I'm a big fan of ethanol and whatever we can do to support and promote the industry. The governor's bill, as I understood it, mostly got through the Senate Ag and Transportations committees as what we'll call it, as it was introduced. But that was to keep it alive through the funnel deadlines. What we've done is our Ag Committee Chairman, Senator Dan Zumba, who's a real good friend of mine, he's working on it over in the Senate, and I know he's working closely with the House on that. It's in Ways and Means right now. He's not on Ways and Means, but he's doing all the work. And what we wanted to do is, the bill as it was originally drafted was a good bill, good overarching policy, a lot of concerns from some of the interested stakeholders, like some of the small service station owners and stuff like that. I won't tell you what town, but some small town in Clay County, I had a guy that owns a service station contact me and had some concerns if we have to, retrofit the pumps and all that kind of stuff. So what Senator Zumba is doing is trying to bring together all the stakeholders one more time, producers, trucking, gas station, insurance, the tank, people that manufacture and work on service the tanks, and try to address some of those concerns so that it's not overtly cost prohibitive if there is any need to retrofit, tanks and stuff like that, to garner as much consensus. And I am glad to hear Senator Wills sounded very optimistic about it, and I was just going to say, sorry, this is where it's at and everything. I feel very optimistic about it too. So I'm glad you shared that. I feel like this is something we can absolutely, get done this year and meet all of those needs. The broader goal of which is, how do we make sure that we're using as much as possible? And of course, I would imagine, like a lot of things, we'll probably make sure that all the state vehicles that we purchase and use are using either ethanol or biodiesel and things like that. That seems like if we're going to ask everybody else to do it, we should be doing it too. So I'm optimistic that we will have a good product that will address some of the concerns in the original bill, but still absolutely capture the intent of the governor's original bill as drafted.
Great, thank you. And Representative Jones.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Leo. I would also agree that this bill does have a lot of hope. It's a really lofty goal, but I think there's a lot of support behind it. There just needs to be some problems worked out. So I think Representative Wills, forgive me, I think it's an appropriation. So this might be headed your way versus headed in my way into Ways and Means. I just tried to look it up, and if I have the right bill number, I think it'll be over in approps, but nonetheless, it'll be it's funnel proof. So there's definitely a lot of time to be working on it. We have fantastic partners in our area when it comes to retailers and also terminals. And supplying fuel to our gas stations throughout the area. Magellan is a great company that does a lot of work in this area, and we need to be mindful of what their concerns are too, and also the concerns of our retailers. And I think that's the biggest hiccup that this bill is facing, is that there are some concerns that some heartburn that just needs to be kind of leveled out, and we need to listen to their concerns and address them. So I really appreciate the folks that have reached out to me and offer their support for the bill, but then also like, hey, these are the things that we need to work on before we can really move it forward. So some of these retailers, my heart goes out to them. They are our grocery stores in rural Iowa, and they're also feeding a lot of people on the road. And so we need to make sure that they can keep their doors open and that they can keep that going. But unfortunately, the original bill, it's estimated that almost 600 retailers would close. And those are going to be a lot of our mom and pop shops. I've heard plenty of people say, well, they were supposed to change out their pumps 20 years ago, so they just need to get on that. Well, quite frankly, they didn't have the money 20 years ago to change out those pumps, and they don't have it today. And so forcing this upon them very well could force them to either make this huge investment now that they are going to have to take out a lot of money for and are going to be paying for in many, many years ahead, or they're just going to close. And so it's a matter of them closing probably, in 5-10 years, staying open a little bit longer, or forcing this mandate on them and then having them close right now. So while I understand that we need to be supportive of ethanol, and I am supportive of ethanol, I think this bill has to get everybody on board. There's a lot of room for compromise here, and I look forward to working on it. Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Representative Jones, and thank you for the question. The next question is from Bob Raymer, and it's related to how COVID money can be used, and specifically if it can be used on roads. So Bob, if you want to go ahead and come up and just make sure that you can speak directly into the microphone.
First of all, I'd like to thank you fellows for coming first and visit with us. Shows your concern. So if it's a one-time thing, perhaps we could use it on the roads and our shaky bridges in the state to get those upgraded to where we can drive safely. And the way we've got now, why those roads have lasted several years, and we're not finding any money anywhere else without taxing people a little bit on gas and a few other things. So hopefully we can use it on our roads and shaky bridges.
Thank you for your question. Representative Jones, if you would like to take the question first, please.
Yeah, sure. And first, I'd just like to say, just because I'm not there in person doesn't mean I'm not concerned. Obviously, I'm still participating, just in a little bit different venue, and I appreciate the opportunity to do this. I am almost 9 months pregnant, and the hospital gets very worried about COVID positive pregnant ladies coming into the door. So I just am trying to limit my bubble as much as I can, and I do the same thing at the Capitol. I spend my days in a cubicle and come out when needed, and I vote from the back of the chamber, and I'm just trying to be really mindful. I have not had COVID yet. And I've got 3 little kiddos in daycare. So I've got a lot happening in my life to where I really need to limit my bubble and probably limit myself from you all as well. So it's just as much as for you as it is for me. But I do appreciate the question when it comes to that one-time injection of funds. I think the first round of CARES Act money, there was a significant injection of federal funds that helped to replace the lost revenue in gas taxes. Because obviously people weren't driving as much, particularly, about a year ago now, for 2 or 3 months thereafter. the roads were just empty. And so the federal government did replace a lot of that gas tax, that lost gas tax revenue. And that is definitely an opportunity that we might be able to have. The federal government is still writing the rules on how that this latest injection can be used. And so we'll just have to follow what they say. I think there's probably going to be some lawsuits, of course, that's going to have to work itself out. But certainly that's an opportunity.
Great. Thank you, Representative Jones. And we certainly do appreciate your participation today. And thank you for making this work as well. Representative Wills, if you want to go ahead and take the question.
It's a great question. So the last round of COVID relief money, the CARES Act, I'll just give you an example that was brought to my attention. I was the floor manager of a bill for Workplace, which is a computer software program. The governor's office was in contact with the Department of Revenue and asked them, well, hey, can we use this money for this software, $21 million? And they said, sure you can. And 9 times, in fact, the governor's office was in contact with the Department of Revenue, the U.S. Department of Revenue, asking them if, hey, is this okay? Well, then in July, after the movement had already begun to purchase this software program with COVID relief money, $21 million, the Inspector General of the United States came back and said, well, wait a minute, we don't know if you can spend that money for this or not. And so the governor's office, rightfully so, and they said, okay, we're not going to push it any further. And they backed out of it. And we just funded that as a supplement just a few weeks ago. So I said that because right now we believe that this money can be used for roads. We believe that it can be used for infrastructure needs, especially where COVID has affected the revenue of a county or a state or a city government. But let me tell you, like the city of Ames has an annual budget of $16 million. They're getting $18 million in COVID money. So they're getting more than their annual budget in money. I would assume probably every one of our county and city governments will be very similar or the same. Our schools are getting unbelievable amounts of money. $1 billion, I've heard, will be going to our schools. There's going to be a lot of money out there. The temptation is to hire people or to use it for ongoing expenses. I would caution folks to say, we've got to use this for a one-time expense. I believe 100% that some of this money should be used to maintain roads, to maintain bridges, and that sort of thing. I think that's a perfect use for the money, along with broadband expansion, along with anything that's going to better our government, better our state over the next generations. I think we should be looking at that versus hiring people today. We've only got 3.1% unemployment. We don't need to do COVID employment at high-paying jobs just to say that we're getting them hired. We need to have good infrastructure, good relief measures, and I believe that building roads or reconstructing roads will do exactly that as well. It'll put people to work. It'll put people on high-paying jobs and that sort of thing. So I'm with you. I think the money should be used for such things as that. I don't know that it should all be used for that, but a good portion should, definitely, because that's an infrastructural need that we have that could benefit our state for generations to come.
Thank you. And Senator Whiting.
Yeah, I'd echo it as well. Fantastic question. I think it's a very wise use of it. I absolutely hope we'll use it. And I use the term infrastructure broadly: roads, bridges, broadband is part of infrastructure. And one of the things that's important in our half of the district is the Lewis and Clark water project that's been going on there. That's mostly a federal project with some state money injected. So any way that we can work to get clean water to those communities, I think would be great as well. Another thing that comes to mind too is, small towns that have, sewage issues, lagoons and stuff like that. You have a small community that has, their lagoon go belly up. That's a lot of money to fix that may not be in there. So these are the kinds of things that I think we should use it for. Absolutely. With that in mind, even President Trump talked about this for 4 years, and now President Biden's talking about a possibility of a multi-trillion-dollar infrastructure, plan, and there's no reason to wait, on that when we have this money. If we can use it for these, these wise uses, like in the schools, where we I should probably lean closer to my mic here. We've seen how the COVID has changed the way we do school. So maybe, I'm not telling schools how to do, I'm just thinking of an idea, is, maybe they can invest that in equipment for remote learning, maybe help increase access to broadband use for students that need it. We passed a bill, I don't know if we passed it I think we passed it off the floor of the Senate, is to allow schools for I think up to 5 days a year use remote learning options, if essentially to replace the snow days. And so as we joked about it in private, we're taking away snow days now, apparently, from kids. But those are the kinds of things that seem like a wiser use of the money. So I think it's a fantastic question. And I think it's something that we should work very closely with the governor on to make sure that money is used. I'm confident that it will be, but make sure it's being used in the most responsible manner.
Great, thank you. We had one question that was submitted to the chamber ahead of time, and since we have about 10 minutes, I'd like to go ahead and just ask the question because potentially it does relate to some of the similar topics that we've already discussed. Can you talk a little bit about potential support or assistance through the state of Iowa for repair and or upkeep of trail systems? And Senator Whiting, if you want to go ahead and start.
Fantastic question, and we love our trails up in this area. I hate to admit this, but my mind was wandering to when we check out of here at about 10:30. I'm going to go home, see my wife and kids, and we're going to go walk on a trail. I don't know if it's going to be here. I don't know if it's going to be back home or if we'll go down to Ruthven, but we love our trails here. So I have heard of this issue before, and as my understanding is that the state appropriations that we do for trails are specifically sort of earmarked or focused on constructing and not on any improvements and things like that. And so I think that's something that would be something that we should consider. I know, we talked about this earlier in the mental health question about, the Invest in Iowa plan, and the way that was structured to take money off of property tax would have increased the sales tax, and that would have funded the IWIL program, which in our half of the district, and though Megan, you come up real close, but in our half of the district is critically important to the lakes area, and part of the money would or could have been designated to trail use. Now, maybe not as much quite as the formula. Whole separate issue. All of that to say, if there are ways, I've contacted our staff and folks on the Appropriations Committee to find out if there are ways that we can maybe change the way that we allocate the RIF dollars. I serve on the RIF committee, the Transportation Infrastructure and Capitals Subcommittee. So if there's any way that we can consider, I know it's a limited amount of money, and the people that probably want to build the trails may not want to, lose the ability to build new trails. But it goes to the question that we had before, is that we can build all the things we want, but we got to maintain what we have and make sure that it works for people too. And so any ways that we can expand the private-public partnership to make sure that our amenities, there's this new term called placemaking? Is that the word? I didn't understand what that word was until, frankly, I just had to look over and make sure I got the word right. But the idea is, how do you make your community, how do you fit all those sort of holistic elements together to make your place, to make your community a place that people want to live and work and play? And certainly trails and recreational opportunities are a big part of that. And I'm going to take advantage of them when I get out of here. So I'll keep talking to my colleagues on the RIF committee and in the appropriations process to see if there are ways that we can expand that and that flexibility to make sure that we're maintaining the trails adequately. Thanks for the question.
Great, thank you, Senator Whiting. Representative Wills.
Great. See, this is why I love to come to these things, because I learn new things. And so I just learned a new term, placemaking. Is a multifaceted approach to planning, design, and management of public spaces. I'm satisfied. I always say, if I learn something new every day, I'm doing good. So I learned something new. Senator Whiting is exactly right. The I Will plan that was proposed last year by the governor was a perfect plan in answer to this question, because it took away the restriction on state funding being used only for new trails and allowed upkeep and maintenance of those trails as well, which would help with that placemaking. And placekeeping, I think, is maybe, I don't know if that's the word, I just invented one, but remove that restriction. But it goes to the kind of the heart of the problem, or in respect to trails, in respect to new buildings, in respect to almost anything infrastructure-wise that the government does, is that all of these things have limited lifetime, limited span. And so quite often I get people come to me and say, we need to have money for maintenance of our trails. We need to do this, we need to do that. And I'm like, why weren't you thinking about that 20 years ago when you built the trail? Because trails last about 20 years. And so we need to really kind of, when we build something, we need to plan for the maintenance of that thing, because I think that's important. That's a conservative value that I hold dear, that we shouldn't be doing things without planning for the future of those things. And I think if we do that, we're going to be much better off. And then we don't have to, our trail's falling apart, we need money for it. Well, let's plan for those things. Let's get in the mode of, when we're doing something that's good, and I believe trails are good. I believe trails are, you go to the Okoboji area, we got trails everywhere, and people come there just for that. And so it's that important. We've got to have trails up in Okoboji. We've got to have maintenance of those trails, but let's plan for that maintenance. And let's not rely on the government or some entity to come forward and say, oh, hey, we're going to just give you a pile of money to maintain that stuff. So that's kind of my, I guess, I don't know if it's a peeve, but it's just one of my deals that, let's not always rely on government. Let's plan for it. But yes, Senator Whiting is exactly right. The I Will would fund that. So in order to get buy-in from a vast multitude of organizations and groups, we did have to change the formula just a little bit so that we would have buy-in. And that formula change did reduce the amount that would go to trails, but still would be millions of dollars a year more for trails than it currently is spent on trails. And so I think that's an important distinction to make. And the legislature was left with the idea of changing that I Will formula to deal with concerns and important issues, topics of the day. Water quality happens to be a hotter topic of the day right now than trails. And so that's kind of where the sacrifice of trails funding went to water quality, because that's what people in the state of Iowa are worried about and what people really are concerned with and want more activity and action done for. So thank you for the question. A very good question. And I think I hopefully answered all right.
Great. Thank you, Representative. Representative Jones, if you want to go ahead and address the question.
Sure. Yep. And I agree with Senator Whiting and Representative Wills on the I Will program and how the Governor's Invest in Iowa Act would have really impacted the trail system in Iowa. I also appreciate the forward-looking word that John made up in placekeeping, stemming off of placemaking. And John, I just want to poke some fun at you a little bit, because that was the second word that you made up this forum, because you also used unethanol earlier today. And I thought that was a really good word. So we've got ethanol and then we've got unethanol gas. So anyways, a few more comments I'd like to make about trails here. First of all, I appreciate all of the citizens and folks that are working on the Stollies renovation. I think that's a really great project. We love to go out to Stollies. It's the perfect distance for our family to be able to walk around and enjoy the trails. And my son can ride his bike just about that amount of time. So it's such a great trail system and really just a quick loop for those little legs. So very much appreciate the work that they're doing out there to renovate that facility out there. There are 3 programs by which trails fundings can be applied for through the DOT. There's a federal recreational trails program, there's the state recreational trails program, and then there's the federal transportation alternatives program. So definitely check into those, see if there's some options out there. But then also coming up April 1st, the DOT is going to be releasing the written program guidelines for the COVID-19 recreational relief trails funding. And so that will be released April 1st. So writing the program details right now. And then there's going to be a deadline of May 15th. So it's about a month and a half turnaround there. So pretty quick turnaround, but just be watching the DOT website for more information there. And the DOT go-to guy, his name is Scott Flagg, and I'm sure he'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody has on those application processes. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Representative Jones. Well, we are at that time where we are ready for some closing comments from our leaders. And with that, Representative Jones, if you would go first. Representative Jones, do you want to go ahead and offer us your closing comments?
Oh, can you hear me?
Now we can.
Okay, all right, perfect. Well, thank you. I apologize for having it on mute. It's just a sign of the times. Thank you all for tuning in today, whether you are tuning in via the radio or on TV or in person or online. Thank you to the Spencer Signal. I know you guys do great work. They're making sure that it's live and everybody can hear. So very much appreciated. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions at any time. I know that right now it's a little bit easier just to shoot off an email or a phone call. And that's certainly that certainly works for me. I understand. No, you shouldn't have to feel like you need to make a trip to Des Moines to get your ideas addressed. So feel free to reach out. But I appreciate the opportunity to participate in the forum, and thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Representative Jones, for taking time. Representative Wills.
I want to say thank you for all of you being here today. I think it's so much more fun to see faces and see smiles and maybe some growls a little bit. But thank you for being here. Thank you for your input and thoughts, because this is how we do government. This is what government is all about. So I want to just say to Representative Jones, I don't let a silly little thing like the dictionary restrict me on what words I use, because I want to be a leader and move forward. And if something doesn't fit what I want to say, I just make up a word. And so that's just the way it is. But no, just in seriousness, I want to make unethanol a word, and placekeeping, whatever. But I want to touch a little bit, because we did talk about the Revenue Estimating Committee, and I just was up here jotting down some notes, and this is the serious part. Our state is doing so good, folks. Our state is doing awesome. We're the #1 state. We didn't talk about this yet today, but we're the #1 state in the nation as far as coming out of the revenue financially sound. And I think that's important to understand. So the Revenue Estimating Committee met yesterday. Let me tell you how good we're doing. So they estimated, based on yesterday's meeting, they estimated, so they meet 3 times a year, sometimes 4 times a year. The last time they met was in December, and then they met yesterday. From December until now, they're saying that our state for the 2021 year is going to have $274.3 million in additional funds. Almost $275 million of additional funds just since December. They're estimating that our revenue is going to increase. For 2022, they're estimating a $306 million increase in revenue for 2022. So that's a huge amount of additional revenue. That means people are actually going out, going to dinner, going to movies, doing stuff. And so that's huge. Gambling revenue, which whether you like gambling or not, they're estimating gambling revenue is going to go up $5.1 million both this year and next year. That's huge, because we fund a lot of our infrastructure out of that gambling revenue. So a lot of repair on buildings, a lot of government buildings are being built with this. It's called RIF. Senator Whiting mentioned it a little bit ago. Here's the important thing that I just want to just briefly touch on, because the Senate did a bill this week on getting rid of the triggers for the tax bill that we passed 3 years ago. Here's the important thing. That trigger was $8.3 billion some odd dollars and a 4% growth rate. The Revenue Estimating Committee said yesterday that in 2023, we'll have $8.7 billion of revenue and a 4.5% growth rate, which means that we have surpassed our triggers. We don't even need the bill the Senate did, because our state is doing awesome. 3 years ago, when we passed that tax bill, we said this is almost impossible for us to reach. And yet through COVID, through all of the things that has hit our state over the derecho, all of the things that has hit our state, we're going to blow through, not just slightly, we're going to blast through those triggers that we thought were kind of almost impossible. We're going to blast through them, and we're going to have a tax cut come in starting in 2023, the biggest tax cut in state history, $620 million of tax relief going to you, the taxpayer. And so I'm just excited about that because, man, it is a long time coming. And so I want to thank you all for being here. It's a great and wonderful day out. So get out and enjoy the weekend, enjoy the trails, enjoy our great life here in the state of Iowa. Invite your friends and relatives that have moved out of the state to come back, because we've got opportunity, we've got growth, we've got potential, and the state is the greatest place to live in the nation and in the world. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Representative Wills. And Senator Whiting.
I really enjoyed speaking after Representative Wills because I just feel like so much more optimistic and hopeful afterwards. And I just want to end on that note. You know, Iowa's a really great state, and through the we talk about broader issues of tax reform and regulatory reform, and I'm sure all of the folks in economic development are cringing at our discussions about tax credits and things like that. But the fact of the matter is, those are parts of how we make our state attractive. And as chair of the Labor Committee, I introduced 3 bills to try to find innovative and attractive ways to attract people to Iowa. We got one went to the Appropriations Committee on remote workers, and next week we're going to take up an issue on income tax rebates for people that move out of state and into the state. So that's part of it. But how do we also work, to market the state and all those things? One of the things I was just looking at the email that we got, and I know there's like some distinctions between we have revenue estimates and then when the triggers kick in with like actual revenues and those sorts of things. And at least our staff indicated that we would meet one trigger easily and perhaps be just short on another trigger. And again, these numbers are fluid and everything, but at least we do have a bill that's available that we passed out to eliminate the triggers if the House is willing to take it, and if ultimately things do come in and the picture is as good, maybe it is a moot point. I just want to thank everybody that was here in person and digitally. It's really great to see people. I see someone in the crowd that is, I've had maybe a handful of visitors come down, and you are one of the handfuls of visitors that came down to visit me. And it's a different world, the way that we do business during COVID. So continue to email us with questions and concerns and ideas. When we debate, 20 and 30 bills on the floor for, 10 hours, that's a really good time for us to keep up with you on email. I really do appreciate the questions. I always joke at these that I prepare in my mind for what we may get asked, and rarely I am asked what I am preparing for. And that's a testament to how important it is that we connect with folks back home in our districts and get a feel for what it is that you care about and what you're passionate about. And then we take that, each 150 of us, we take that down to Des Moines and we try to build it together, mush it all together and make the best policy that we can. So thank you for the great honor of serving as your state senator. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thanks to the chamber for hosting us. And I look forward to, I see a sign that says we'll see you in 2022. I look forward to seeing y'all in 2022.
Great. Thank you. On behalf of the Spencer Chamber, I'd like to thank everyone for attending today and for those who also submitted questions beforehand. I'd also like to take this moment to thank our area legislators who are willing to give of their time on the weekend to share current information about what is happening at the State House. And thank you to our event sponsors, Spencer Municipal Utilities, Farmers Trust and Savings Bank, Northwest Bank, and Farm Bureau. Thank you again to Representative Jones for joining us via Zoom, and for the City of Spencer for allowing us to use their facility and accommodate our technology needs. Thank you to the Spencer Police Department, Spencer Municipal Utilities, MediaCom, Spencer Radio Group, the Spencer Daily Reporter, and Spencer Signal for covering this forum so those in Northwest Iowa can be up to date on statewide topics. Thank you again for joining us in person, Representative Wills and Senator Whiting. We appreciate it. This is the final legislative forum for 2021. We will reconvene in 2022 and hopefully things are back to normal. Please remember before you leave to feel free to grab a newsletter for Representative Jones, Representative Wills, or Senator Whiting on the table. Thank you again.